Yeah, and I'm absolutely delighted that this week on Kambu FM Sportzone, we've got the return of the furnace sporting legend, Matt Ryder, back from his adventures in the Himalayas, climbing Mount Everest. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm good, thanks, Tony. I wouldn't go as far as saying legends, but local sports person, I think will do.
I always try and beef up my guests, Matt, so I can get you talking freely and get that confidence in you.
No problem.
Right, Matt. So you've been on an adventure, a once-in-a-lifetime adventure. Before we get into the detail, just summarise to the listeners in a few words, what was it like?
Breathtaking. There's one word. Total out-of-this-world experience from the moment I landed to getting to Everest Base Camp and top of Kalapatar in the early hours, to making my way back to Katmandu, meeting some lovely people and seeing the world from a different perspective.
Wow. So if it was one word, Matt, it'd be breathtaking, eh?
Yeah, literally. And I'll come to that in a second. Great.
So let's go back, Matt. I think you left England on, was it the 6th of November?
Yeah, so Saturday, I think it was Saturday the 6th of November. I left a sunny Manchester, which is very rare. So the family and I, we went through to Manchester, spent the day shopping.
Right.
And then my wife left me at the terminal, as you do now, because it's very impersonal, isn't it, due to security. Lone traveller, a suitcase and a sort of cabin bag. My daughter's waving me off, and it was quite surreal, actually. I felt quite emotional because I've got firstly getting the freedom as a married man to go and do something like this, but also quite terrifying that, oh my goodness, I'm on my own now. I've got to figure this out for myself because normally when you go on holidays and things, it's obviously somebody with you that kind of, you get through it together, don't you? So yeah, it was quite a daunting experience.
So you got on a plane in Manchester, and where was it going?
So I had to do two plane journeys. So I left Manchester Terminal 1, full of Man United supporters that were on the EasyJet Ryanair flights back to Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland, which was interesting, especially when my team City had just beaten them. So that was always quite nice, but I had my head down. I flew to Dubai on my first leg of the journey.
Right.
So I managed to get good flights with Emirates Airlines, which really comfortable. I thought I might as well, fly in comfort. So we flew to Dubai. I had a few hours in Dubai, just relaxing in one of the lounges, something to eat. And then I transferred from Dubai directly to Katmandu, which was my first real experience because I went from the luxuries of Terminal 1 Manchester, which if you can call it luxurious, to a brilliant airport in Dubai, really state-of-the-art modern buildings, to Katmandu Airport, which was something like out of the Eastern Bloc. Really, you knew you were in a third world country. Really, really dark, quite threatening place. It was quite scary, surreal experience. And the COVID rules were exceptionally strict. So you literally were paraded in front of security, a few at a time, very slow process, very strict, checking PCRs, checking double vaccinations. So I felt really safe and reassured in that sense. But it took about an hour to get through the actual airport itself. Fortunately, my bags were waiting for me. You hear horror stories of people on these treks arriving and no luggage. So I had my walking boots in my hand luggage, just in case. So at the very least, I could at least put my walking boots on. Managed to get through security and then walked past hordes of locals holding billboards up with names on, trying to find my name, which took a while. And obviously I'm on my own and it's a different language, it's a different culture, quite daunting. Managed to find the rep. Sorry?
What time of the day was it, Matt? Was it dark?
It was late, yeah. It was about 10:30 in the evening, local time. So again, you're quite surreal. You're walking into darkness. Quite surreal, actually. Managed to find my rep, who then basically took my luggage and walked me up this big ramp into this huge car park and put my luggage on the back of this minibus. There was a party of Indians who were also part of a trekking party, already sat on this bus. I sat down on this bus, I said hello. I think one member of the group could speak English, so they actually said hello. The rest of the group were kind of looking as if, who's this person? So that was quite daunting because you hope to kind of start a conversation. I sat for an hour in this bus in this car park. Obviously, they were waiting for other passengers to arrive. To which suddenly the guy opened the sliding doors and said, "Wrong bus, you're over here." Moved me over to a taxi, put me in a taxi, put my 2 bags in, and the taxi set off. It's kind of like, oh, okay. So they must have got some logistics wrong somewhere. And then the journey from the airport to my hotel was about half an hour. It was in the middle of a festival. So there was a sort of Buddhist festival going on, so the streets were busy. And the roads were, I always thought the streets of Rome were really treacherous with driving conditions. This was something else. They don't have, they drive on the left, but the left is just a suggestion. There's mopeds everywhere, there's people everywhere, the streets are narrow, there's potholes, there's no real traffic lights, there's just a police officer with a whistle. And it was terrifying. And I've been to Bangkok and sat in tuk-tuks. I've experienced the Rome. In Rome, my wife and I went to Rome a few years ago and the driving was terrifying. This was something else. So I'm already thinking Everest can't be any worse than this half an hour transfer. Anyway, we got there in one piece and literally checked into the Ramada Encore, which is a really nice hotel in Katmandu. With the organisation, they wanted to have a nice hotel at the start and at the end because, well, the wording was you'll need a nice hotel after the conditions that you're going to experience. So it was really nice modern city centre hotel. Checked in, managed to get something to eat and a beer before bed. It was quite nice.
Right. So these are the colleagues that you mentioned before you went, Matt. Were they in that hotel or?
No. So I found out on the trek, there was actually 2 parties on the Himalayan Wonders group that I signed up with. They were running the trek. One was a group of Indians from Mumbai, I think they were from, and they had their own Indian guide as well. So they had obviously their own exclusive package. And I was in this second party, which was, I'd say it's more Western. So English speaking, there was people, 2 from America. There was someone from the Cayman Islands. There was a couple of lads from London, a young lady from Dublin. So quite a diverse group, diverse ages. I met them the morning after. So obviously I had the night in Kathmandu airport. First thing in the morning, I was summoned. There was a letter posted under my door to summon to a briefing. I met one of the Sherpas who introduced himself, introduced my colleagues, took the money off us. Because the other thing that we had to do is because of the currency transfer rates and things, they asked us if we'd pay in cash the remainder. So we paid a deposit and then cash. And so I was carrying about £900 in cash, which was the remainder of my budget on me, which is always quite nervy, isn't it, when you're travelling, pickpockets or you accidentally drop out. So I had to walk down these narrow streets to meet up with a rep. It wasn't actually in my hotel, it was at a sister hotel, and hand over the money. We had a briefing. So they literally told us that they've delayed the trek by 24 hours due to some conditions up in Lukla, which is where the airport is, low cloud. Therefore, you've got an extra day to relax in Kathmandu and get ready for your trek. So it was 6 a.m. flight. It was the following day. Right. I was expecting to fly that afternoon to Lukla from Kathmandu. So I had a whole day of exploration, which was nice in a way because I managed to unpack my case. I managed to work. We were only allowed to take 10 kilos on the trek. I had about 25 kilos in my suitcase. You always take too much, don't you, when you travel? So I managed to figure out what I was and wasn't taking. Some of the nice clothes that I had bought specially, unfortunately, had to stay. However, it meant that when I got back, I had nice clothes, clean clothes to get into West. So I did some exploration. Kathmandu, boiling hot. It was about 26, 27 degrees, shorts and T-shirt. Bumped into a local that touted me into a tour. I kind of felt, well, I'm on my own. It's quite scary, these narrow streets, lots and lots of traffic. For £5-10, okay. So this guy took me to a couple of the temples. We went to one of the famous monkey temple in the centre of Kathmandu. Saw a little bit of Buddhist culture. Saw the poverty, which is quite sickening, actually, from the earthquake a few years ago. They haven't recovered. Interesting, the COVID regulations really strict. Everybody was wearing masks, even on the street. We don't see that in this country, let alone this country. There was really a worry and concern about, obviously, the COVID. So it was interesting to see how they were regulating the conditions. And it was nice. Finally, in the evening, I got to sit on a rooftop bar overlooking the city with fireworks, because obviously the Buddhist festival. And I felt like I was on holiday. It was nice. I actually didn't feel as guilty. And I felt really, first time in 18 months, proper holiday after the hustle and bustle of work and everything else. So I felt really relaxed and prepared. So it was good.
So eventually you went to this other hotel to get on, a bus to the airport the next morning?
Yeah, so early hours in the morning, I was up at 4. We were picked up at 5 from outside the hotel, actually. There was actually, out of the 6, there was another 2 people within my party in the hotel. So it was nice that evening I actually managed to make some friends, which that was my worry. Going on your own, traveling on your own, it's quite daunting. And, I'm a confident person, but it was like anything, it's that Tuckman theory, isn't it? That storming, norming, forming. So I met these two guys, a little bit older than myself, both retired, but very fit marathon runners. And they were kind of ticking off the bucket list as well. We got picked up at 5 a.m. We were transferred on a little minibus to the main airport, the same airport I landed in Katmandu, but it had a separate terminal for internal flights.
Oh, yeah.
And literally the Sherpa guides that we have took my passport, took my bag, said, wait here, disappeared, weighed my bag, came back and said, you owe 200 rupees because your bag's a few pounds over. 200 rupees is about £1.50. Okay, that's fine. It means I've got some chocolate bars in there, then fine. And literally then they guided us through a little bit of security and then into a little minibus. Minibus took us across some of the tarmac to a tiny 12-seater plane. Sat on the runway, propellers. I think it was like a 1940s Czech Airlines plane. You could see the pilot. There was like a little bit of perspex between you and the pilot. And we were then having a 25-minute flight into the Himalayas on to Lucknow, which is argued the most dangerous airfield in the world, which you kind of read about and you think, yeah, okay, it looks a bit daunting, but there's hundreds of flights. Well, I'll be right. Plane takes off, like, as you do. It's always a little bit, I don't care who you are, every flight that you ever take, it's always that little moment, isn't it, as it takes off. We take off, you can't hear yourself think because you can hear the propellers. I feel like it was like a Lancaster bomber or something. It was really loud. And then suddenly you're scraping the tops of these mountains. You're literally looking out your window and you think, oh my goodness. And you can hear the control mechanism saying, pull up, terrain, pull up, pull up. And you're thinking to yourself, is the pilot flying a bit too low? Or is it like and we found out afterwards it was the automated aviation systems that the pilots ignore because they have to fly this sort of risk. And literally you are flying in the clouds and then suddenly the nose dips and it just goes straight down. Your stomach goes like a roller coaster. Everybody screeches and takes a deep inhale of breath. And then suddenly you see the runway bounce, engines roar and you stop. And you look around you and you're just in the middle of a valley with huge mountains, like pointy mountains. And everyone goes, oh. And literally the doors open and there's a guy with a whistle telling you to get off. And you can't take a photograph of the runway. They chase you off the terminal so quickly, literally into the building. And as we are, there's half a dozen people coming in the opposite direction. They have about a half an hour window where there's no cloud. Therefore, it's like a well-oiled machine getting people on and off. So it was like, oh, I'm here. Oh, wow, this is amazing. And there's a guy whistling, like an officer whistling and pointing and shouting in Nepalese to tell you to move on. So you don't really have time to soak it up. Suddenly you're inside a very cold airport terminal, very small room, and say your guide is sort of passing you your passport and saying, follow me. And we literally left this little room up a flight of stairs and we were suddenly in a tea room. And we didn't realise that the company that we flew with are very close associates of the owner of the airfield, who also owns his own tea house. So therefore, very nice. You just literally through a door up some stairs and you're in a tea room. And the guy that owns the tea room and also coordinates the airstrip is actually behind the counter serving breakfast. And he's like, and he's got a walkie-talkie and he's talking to his. It's a quite interesting way of doing things. So that we got breakfast. That was the first stop. we got breakfast, really nice cooked breakfast. After 7 a.m., you're quite ready for breakfast. It's freezing cold. First thing we noticed that it isn't as warm as it was in Katmandu. We've only maybe flown 40 miles or so. Suddenly we're at 2,000 feet, 2,000 meters, sorry. So we're high, twice the height of Scafell Pike nearly, the highest point in England. Some breakfast, and literally then we meet our porters. And there was 3 porters for our group of 6. There was 8 of us in total if we count. We had 2 guides, 3 porters. They came along, they picked up my 10-kilo bag, they picked up 2 others, tied a rope around them, put it around their forehead. I said hello, very basic English, and set off. Off they went. And it's just, they were about 7 or 8 stone, nothing of them, no muscle, no body fat. Very, very small guys, very, very humble, very polite, and they were gone. That meant my luggage was on its way to its first destination. Our guides then briefed us, we're going to do a short walk today to a village called Pading, where your first accommodation will be. You're going to walk slightly uphill, then downhill, because Pading is actually lower than Lukla. You're going to cross some beautiful rivers and experience the Himalayas. And that's what we did. So literally, no sooner had we eaten, they were telling us to put our backpacks on. So we had our own day pack with water. They briefed us on the importance of drinking at least 2 litres for acclimatization. And we set off. We went past prayer flags. We went past memorials, up steep steps. It was very alpine to describe the area. It was like low trees, rocky, a little bit like the Lake District in parts, which made you feel quite nice. Nothing overly strenuous. And as the day progressed, the sun came up, it actually became very warm. So the fleeces came off, T-shirts. Luckily, I had a pair of shorts in my day pack. So I managed to put some shorts on, suntan lotion. It was about 8 or 9 degrees, but it felt a lot warmer because you're moving. We saw some of the locals, the Sherpas, carrying doors on their backs, cast canisters. So they don't have Amazon delivery like we do. Everything is carried on foot on the back of human beings and donkeys and some of the yaks and caks. So that was quite nice. It was just to see no cars. So Katmandu was very noisy. There was no cars, the occasional helicopter taking the rich and famous and wealthy up to the highest slopes and bringing people down that were injured, because unfortunately there is quite a lot of accidents up there. We stopped at Pading, and Pading is just a very small village. And when I say very small, I'm talking maybe 100 people, 2 or 3 tea houses, an Irish bar, funny enough, and a couple of coffee shops. We ate at the first tea house. The family cook for you. So they literally have maybe 4 or 5 bedrooms, twin rooms, which are made out of plywood. Very basic, with taps, running water, and a sink, and a small toilet. And then a room adjacent that's basically a communal area where there's a kitchen where wife, granny, aunties are all busy cooking, and the males are predominantly doing the maintenance and looking after the tea room. You sit down, and interestingly, our guides would take our order, take the order to the hatch where the kitchen was, and then wait on us. So you'd order, and the foods are very basic. We were warned not to eat the meat because the meat is carried by hand from Katmandu on the back of a cart or the back of a donkey. You just don't know, do you? No. And there is horror stories that people do try the yak steak and then they're badly for 2 or 3 days. So I had a vegetarian diet for the whole 12 days I was up in the Himalayas. So difficult when you like your meat, and the home comforts. But what was nice is that the guides serve you, and then they sit down and have their food. It's very courteous. We're the guests of their country. And then we have a short briefing about the next day, so some of the things where we're going, locations, some of the things to look out for. And then we went back to our room. There was Wi-Fi and electricity at this place, which was nice. When you think of areas of Cumbria, areas in Barrow that don't have good Wi-Fi. It was nice just to check in with the family, upload a few pictures to my social media. So I tried to do like a daily diary of
all them, Matt.
And slept fairly well, sleeping bag and a quilt. in the most basic accommodation. It's like lying in your garden shed, best way to describe it. But it was okay. It was cold during the night, but warm as soon as the sun came up.
So has all this been paid for? You don't pay as you stay.
Yeah.
It's all part of the trip, is it?
Different ways you can do it. You can pay as you go, but this particular company, the £900 that I parted with when I arrived, was to pay for my accommodation and my food.
Right.
So I had 3 meals a day and 1 warm drink per meal, basically. Anything else was extra. So if I wanted a beer or a soft drink or an additional warm drink, you had to pay. But we're talking pence.
Pennies.
You know, it's not. I didn't have an alcoholic drink from leaving Katmandu just because I was taking Diamox, which is a altitude sickness tablet, and it's just was a little bit cautious of mixing medication and alcohol. As though after the first day, you do fancy a beer, and there's bottles of Everest on the shelves, and you kind of think, "Ooh, I fancy one. I wonder what that's like." But I didn't. I restrained myself. The second day was a longer day. I think it was about 9 miles climbing to a village called Namche Bazaar. Now that's the Sherpa capital city, and it's in the midst, it's on a slope, and it's in the middle of a huge mountain range. But to get there, we had to climb large steps. We had to go across big suspension bridges, which were terrifying. So below you, there'd be a 60-foot drop into a river on a little bit of steel. It reminded me of that Indiana Jones scene in Temple of Doom, you know, when they crossed that bridge. I kept saying in my head, saying, "Strong wood, Indy, strong wood." But they were fine. They were well built. They were well structured. And you can see the caks and yaks carrying huge gas canisters on their backs, 20 in a train going across. So, and they weigh a lot more than I do. So some of the etiquette, if there's an animal on the bridge, you get off it. So if you set off on the bridge and you see donkeys or the yaks coming towards you, turn around, come back. Porters, as I said, the first day they take your bags and they disappear, and they do exactly the same thing the following morning. They get to your location before you do. They are super fit animals, human beings. They carry 40, 50k at altitude, uphill, across the foreheads, and they're always ahead of you. And bizarrely, when we catch them up, they quickly put the bags on the necks, and they go again. They don't sit with us. They're non-intrusive, and they're just lovely people. Very grateful. They see them doing that service supports their family, and even though you feel a bit guilty thinking they're getting paid about £1, £2 a day, but that £1, £2 a day to them compared to carrying a door 30 miles uphill is a lot better for them. So to them, they're very humble and very appreciative.
Right.
So we arrived at Namche Bazaar, very nice little village, lots of shops. It's the last place where you can use an ATM. There's coffee shops. There's another Irish bar, not run by Irish families, but there's an Irish theme. And the girl that was in our party from Dublin was made up because she could buy an Irish flag, and she managed to she said she'd had a coffee at the highest Irish bar in the world, you know, things like that. So it's quite nice in that sense. We then had an opportunity to meet the locals, visit some of the shops and facilities, and basically take in some of the culture. We were given an acclimatization day the following day. So the following day was literally us and the locals to get used to that higher altitude. So it's very well regulated with the travel company. They don't just expect you just to set off from day one and make your way to Everest, because the human body needs to adapt, particularly Westerners. We aren't built for altitude. The Sherpas are, through evolution, can breathe at those altitudes quite comfortably. So I had a night in Namche Bazaar, met a lovely family that owned the guest house, a little girl that spoke fantastic English that was obsessed with us, you know, practicing her English, which was really nice. The next day we had what was called an acclimatization day. However, it wasn't an easy day because the guides take us on walks. So in the morning we had a short walk up a little mountain just to get you higher. The way the body works, get higher, breathe at a higher altitude, then come back down, and your brain kind of starts working its magic, trying to get you accustomed to it. And then in the afternoon, we went up to a place called the Everest View Hotel, which is a hotel, famous hotel, that gives you your first view of Everest, which is really nice. A hard walk, up a very steep uphill, but once you get there, it's really rewarded. You get your first glimpse of what's called the Everest Massif. So Everest is a tiny triangle on the top of a big lump of rock that contains several mountains. I always had a vision that it was just this big pyramid in the middle of nowhere. It's not. It's actually a part of a bigger collection of mountains. So that was nice. We then come back down to Namche Bazaar and basically prep for the next day. A couple of people in the group had blisters, so they hadn't properly prepared is probably the nicest way to put it, or they didn't have the appropriate footwear. One guy actually bought his footwear in Katmandu from one of the market stalls, and his feet were rotten, and that was after 2 days or 3 days of walking. Our guide realised that he had the same size feet, so gave him his shoes and wore the dodgy shoes, which is incredible. Just that's how humble these Sherpas are. He just said, I'll suffer. You wear these comfortable shoes, which was really nice. We then left Namche the next day and went on a very long walk to a place called Dibuchi. And on that route, we dropped down into the river. Huge drop, so we come right down. But obviously what goes up must come down, or what goes down must come up. We then had to climb out of that valley to get onto this other mountain ridge, and it was awful. It really hurt. Suddenly you realise that you don't quite have the same stamina that you had if you were walking in the lakes. Your heart rate came up straight away, your cheeks were burning, you couldn't get your breath. Wow. You had to have lots of periodic, every 10, 15 seconds, you'd have to stop for 10, 15 seconds. It was like a real cardiovascular hit workout that you weren't used to. You know, I do a lot of spinning, a lot of walking in the lakes. I quite happily could walk to the top of the mountain. Yes, I'd be out of breath, but I could do it without stopping and force myself through it. Your body just did not like it at all. So that was the first time I thought, oh, this is quite hard. This is difficult. And our guides would walk at a pace that was unfamiliar, really slow. But in some ways, they sold it to us because they said, while we're walking slow, stop, take a photograph, take in the scenery, enjoy it. And then they'd say, jam, jam, off we go, which was the local dialect for hurry, let's go. So they kind of kept us moving without us getting too exhausted, but also not spoiling the experience. So that was really nice. We got to Tengboche Monastery, which is a famous monastery, Buddhist temple. Lots of films about Everest have this monastery. They go in, a lot of the famous climbers go in there and get blessed prior. You have to pray to the mountain. So a big belief that Everest is a god, and you have to ask permission from the gods to go for safe passage. So it's quite moving to see all that culture and how those beliefs are. You weren't allowed to take cameras into the monastery, which was a shame because it was beautiful. And to think again, to get all that equipment and ornaments and decor, it's all by hand. It's all been carried by hand on the back of a donkey or back of a Sherpa. So you take things for granted, don't you, when you look at your luxuries at home? You know, you can literally ring Amazon or online, get Amazon a delivery the next day. They can't do that. They haven't got that technology. So very short stop in Tengboche. Again, views of Amadablam mountain, which is a beautiful mountain. It's probably my favourite, to be honest. Just here, literally in your eye line, lots of photographs, lots of journal entries, because I took a handwritten journal of what I was seeing. And then we stopped in a valley called Dibuchi at the Paradise Lodge. And I say that, I cringe when I think about the Paradise Lodge. The Paradise Lodge is probably the worst accommodation I've ever stayed in. And that's bearing in mind we've stayed in Blackpool hotels and places like that. I've been to other third world countries and experienced cultures. We stayed in the Paradise Lodge in the middle of a valley. I think it was cheap. So I think we were scammed a little bit by our company, because we did have good tea houses collectively, but this was rough. It was a tea room with no electricity other than a solar panel, but because it was in a valley, you were kind of below the cloud line, so there wasn't much sun, so there was no Wi-Fi. So that was a luxury we lost straight away. The heating was a stove in the centre of the room that they put yak droppings in. So they heat it with yak droppings. that's a unique smell in itself. And we didn't have enough yak droppings because there's two ways round to Tengboche. One is through the valley past the guest lodge, and the other one is a different route. And this particular day, there wasn't many yaks and cats on the route, so he didn't manage to get much shoveling. So one of his jobs in the daytime is to follow the trail and get enough yak droppings to heat your fire. So it was cold. So a really cold tea room. And then the rooms themselves were literally plywood matched together. There was no running water. So there was a toilet, but no running water. So really poor. And you were thinking, is this a sign of things to come? So you're getting into bed cold, your face, your nose is freezing, you're getting into your sleep bag, you're lying under your covers to get warm, but then there's not much oxygen up there, so you feel uncomfortable under your covers. So you end up sticking your face out to breathe, and then you get... So a really rough night, really bunged up sinuses in the morning, didn't sleep particularly well, felt really grouchy and miserable in the morning, and knew that we had another big walk ahead of us. So the Paradise Lodge wasn't paradise, although I got up early because I couldn't sleep. It was about 5 a.m. I got my warm clothes on, stepped outside. It was warmer outside than it was in the rooms. And I got a brilliant mountain view. So one of my favourite photographs is this mountain called Tengboche. So not Tengboche, Tebushi. And it's just the light, and you just realise why you're there. You're not there for luxury. You're there to see the mountains. And I got to see this lovely sort of sunrise silhouette of this mountain, which was really nice. So every cloud, as they say. And literally, no sooner as you've got dressed, quick breakfast. So I was eating porridge at this point with yak milk, which isn't the best, but with plenty of honey, it's tolerable. I get those essential carbs in you. And then we literally set off then to a town called Tengboche. There's lots of boches you'll notice in the name. Boche is valley. So the first part of the name is like the area within a valley. Again, climbing up again. We're getting up now close to 4,000 metres, really getting high. Very slow, very steady. Your legs were burning, your back started to ache because obviously you've got several days of carrying your day sack with you, and even just 2 litres of water. It's quite heavy on your back. Fitness-wise, I felt okay, but you could sense that this is getting a bit tougher. We arrived at Tengboche, which is a little tiny village again in the middle of a valley. Not much in the village itself other than local houses and a couple of tea houses and a coffee shop. I think there's a French bakery as well, bizarrely. And then you literally have the summit of Amadablam right here, which you could see quite closely, where it was a big pointy mountain from a couple of days earlier. You could literally almost see the summit, which was really nice. We got there about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and we were just given a couple of hours just to chill out, and we visited the coffee shop and had a bit of time in our rooms just to relax. And it was then at that sort of tea time, just as the sun was going down, I didn't start feeling myself. So I started getting a really bad headache. So I took a couple of paracetamol. I thought I'm probably dehydrating. It's been a long day. And literally lay down for maybe an hour. One of my colleagues came to find me. Said, "Oh, Matt, we're having a briefing at 6. You come in?" And I kind of went, "Oh, yeah." So a bit disorientated. Went in for the briefing at 6. We ordered our evening meal, which was planned for 7:30. And I started looking at the light in this room, and it felt really thick, really dull. And I just put it down to, at the time, I thought, is this just because of LED lights? Because it's all powered off solar panels. So obviously, but my colleague was reading, and I thought, how can they read in this light? It's almost impossible. Anyway, I went back to the room, and then I really started feeling unwell. I thought, I feel nauseous. I can't breathe. I started coughing. Something wasn't right. So anyway, when we went back for our evening meal, I literally walked into the room, and everybody's jaw sort of dropped and said, "Are you all right?" And I was like, "No, I really don't feel well. I feel like I've got a really bad dose of the flu." Something brilliant how the guides, they literally took me to one side and said, "What prescription of Diamox are you taking?" And I said, "Well, I'm taking the the lowest recommended at the moment. Okay, you need to double it. So they were basically tablets that were snapped in half. Take you a half now, and I want you to take a full one from now on. Gave me some water, gave me some garlic soup, which I didn't really want to eat anything when you're feeling lousy, but they said garlic soup is good. You're suffering from altitude sickness. He had a sensor that you put on your fingers to check your oxygen levels. He recommended is 75. I was at 67. So if I was back home, I'd have been asked to go up to the trainee. He gave me a canister of air and said, just take some deep breaths, get some fresh oxygen into your system. So I felt lousy. And he said, basically, we may have to take you back down to Namche Bazaar because the best treatment for altitude sickness is to get lower down. So you're kind of thinking to yourself, no, I don't want to go down. I don't want to quit. But my body was telling me something wasn't right. I spoke to my wife, who's a nurse, and she was, don't be the big man. You can do it next year. It's about being healthy and being safe. To which I kind of agreed, but I was also hoping that I would recover. So I went to bed that night. One of the guides, we were twin room, one of the guides stayed with me. So I slept in the opposite side of the room. And he was brilliant, just kept checking. You all right, Matt? Are you okay, my friend? Yes, I feel okay. Try and get some sleep. So literally a couple of paracetamols and I was gone, slept. Woke up in the morning and felt like a different person. So part of me was thinking, this is it. Yeah. I woke up, obviously the Diamox had done its bit. Obviously sleeping through the night, you're naturally acclimatizing. Felt a lot better. The guide said, we're going to do a acclimatization walk because it's an acclimatization day. You're more than welcome to stay here. We're going to that mountain there. I'm going to stand at the top of that mountain, take some pictures, have some tea, and then come back down, and you've got the afternoon to yourself to reflect, etc. Do you want to join us? You're more than welcome to sleep it off. And I thought, well, can I, as it's within eyesight of the tea house, can I not just do it? And if I get tired, just turn around and come back down. I don't need a guide because I can literally see where I was heading. And they said, it's entirely up to you. We're not going to force it. It's your trip. It's your experience. We just need to make sure that you're well. So we set off, very steep. Again, everyone's breathing's totally changing. Everybody's got a cough. They call it the Kumbu cough. So it's just to do with the thin air and the dryness and the cold. Everyone gets a cough. Everyone was coughing and spluttering at this point. But I felt strong. I felt like I'd had some, half a dozen Red Bulls or some ephedrine or something. I just had this second wind.
Yep.
And I literally was leading up this group. I was powering up, and I felt great. And I don't know whether it was like a placebo because I'd had this extra medication or just a good night's sleep. I don't know, but got to the top of this mountain, amazing views. It kind of made it worthwhile because it's like you're seeing different, not Everest, you're seeing other mountains that are all hidden. And you're like, oh my goodness me, it's Mountain Tabusi. I just was mesmerized by this sacred mountain up there that they're not allowed to climb. It's a particular mountain that even the locals don't climb because it's where the water supplies come from. It's quite sacred. And I just could not keep my eyes off it. And it's like when I'm in the lakes, I look at mountains and I think, oh, really pretty mountain, really nice view. I was picturing away, camera, this particular mountain. And I've actually, since I've returned, I've actually got it printed out, enlarged to frame because it just, I don't know whether it was just my emotions at that point. I was feeling like it was game over. And then suddenly I'm feeling great again. This sacred mountain's my target. So I felt great. We came back down. We then went to this French bakery and had cake, coffee and cake, proper coffee, because at the tea houses it was all instant. Proper coffee, huge gâteaux made by the local family there, free Wi-Fi, electricity so we could charge our power banks and things. Managed to ring home, speak to everybody and reassure them that I'm still alive, I'm all right. So generally felt a lot better. So we knew we were 2 days then from base camp. So we then leave Dingboche, we climb over the Kumbu Valley above the tree line, so suddenly there's no trees anymore, it's just rock. The oxygen levels again are going, so literally gasping every. You don't talk to the people around you because if you talk, you're not breathing properly. You've got to get into. It's almost like when you get into a rhythm when you're running. That constant breathing. Really could feel it in your chest as well. Your lungs, your full lungs were getting used. Your body's pumping. Your muscles in your arms and your legs are really pumped. It's almost like a really intense weight session. I felt quite good actually. It's during the day you could wear a t-shirt and start with a fleece and a t-shirt base layer and strip off. You felt good. You felt, oh, I feel really pumped as if I just had a gym session because your body is working tirelessly to get that oxygen around your muscles and things. You walk through this valley and you get to a place called, you're heading for a place called La Buche. And to do that, you go through a valley called Tukla. You start seeing some of the glaciers in the distance, and you can see sort of Everest and Nuptse, which is a famous mountain on that Everest massif. And we went through what's called the Climbers Memorial. So there's this sort of ridge on the top of this. So you're constantly going up and down mountains as you're going up. It's constant, like a Toblerone. You're constantly going up over mountains. And sometimes you don't even realise you're on a mountain. It just feels, because of your eye level, you just feel it's flat, but you kind of know. And there's what's called the Climbers Memorial, which is for all the Sherpas and Westerners that have tried to climb Everest and have sadly passed away. So there's a film called Everest, which was based on the 1996 expedition where several people died. There's a guy called Scott Fisher, famous climber, was stranded on Everest during a storm. It really moving. So it was basically almost like gravestones wrapped around with prayer flags and Buddhist prayers and symbols. And we just sat for maybe a half an hour. The views are incredible. Probably the best views I've ever seen. Better there than when you actually got to base camp, believe it or not, because you're kind of surrounded by mountains, where here it's just like on a ledge looking out to the world. I thought, what a beautiful place to have a memorial, and it was quite choking to think these poor people are doing something that they want to do, they enjoy, and have died. So it made it quite realistic. People do get to the top of Everest and enjoy that moment, but many don't. So that was really, really special for me. And again, photographed to death. And again, totally different. The scenery from here was totally different to the scenery the previous day, and every day was different, which made it quite interesting. There's a danger, obviously, you worry that everything's the same, and after a few days you just get a bit fed up with it, but you don't. Every day is kind of new and fresh. And you look back and you can see where you were, and you think, I was there 2 days ago. I really walked that distance. And you realise why your body's aching. So it's quite special in that sense. Got to La Buche and we met our Indian friends. So the friends that I met at the airport, they were at La Buche. La Buche, there's only 2 guest houses or tea houses at La Buche, so quite a busy place, because this is the last stop before you get to Goreshep, which is where base camp is. It's quite a junction of people. Now, normally it's extremely busy, this section, but because of COVID, we were privileged to the point where there's probably 2/3 of what normally are there, not there. So we had a lot of privacy. It was just us, which was nice. However, when we got to La Buche, it was quite busy. Our Indian friends were there. They have a completely different etiquette when it comes to being quiet in the evenings at bedtimes. They like their video calls. So where we might maybe text or have a quick phone call, they video call their entire dress book and speak out loud, obviously enjoying the experience. But when you've had little sleep and you've had several hours walking, all you want to do is have a bit of peace and quiet. So interesting cultural differences. We mixed with a few Canadians and a few Americans that had been up to base camp and told us how dreadful it was because they got up there and it was cold and wet and miserable. And they were really making us feel great when the next day that's what we were going to do. So you kind of think, oh, great. Horrific night's sleep. I think I slept 2 hours. Just could not breathe. I felt like I was in like a mindfulness meditation session. My brain was that focused on breathing that it couldn't switch off to allow me to sleep. So woke up feeling miserable and grumpy. So I guess those guys maybe have the similar experience. I don't know, maybe sleep deprivation. So we leave La Buche. You then climb over what's called the Kumbu Glacier. So I've read about glaciers. Remember doing glaciers at school in geography lessons. You look in the Lake District and you can see the remains are from glacial formations. You know, those nice U-shaped valleys that we've got in the lakes, but never actually seen one in action. So climbing over these rock formations, deep ice fields, lakes that are completely frozen, you know, incredible. Just wow, your jaw dropping. You can see where it's carved part of the mountain away, almost like if it's a cheese board and you just cut through it. It's just really fascinating for me. And I felt like I was on a geography field trip. It was great just to see that. And you eventually get to Gorishet, which is the last settlement before base camp. I thought that base camp was at Gorishet. So I can remember getting there, throwing my bag down, thinking, get in there, we're here, we've made it. All the mountains are around you and you think, this is marvellous, absolutely marvellous. Exhausted, struggling to breathe, but yes. And then our reps tell us that base camp's an hour and a half in that direction. And you kind of think, oh, okay. So we left our bags at our tea house, just took water and cameras, set off over this glacier, which was terrifying because it was like sheet ice. Rocks were moving underfoot, real sort of crumbly screes. You could see landslides around you, people tripping over, people struggling with the coughs and breathing. Really challenging. Downhill, the base camp's slightly lower than Gorishet, and we eventually got there. So you get there, you have your moment. There's a big rock with the Everest engraved on there. There's no expeditions there this time of year. So normally you'd see lots of tents and different climbing parties. It's not the right time of year for the ice. It's dangerous to climb Everest at that time of year because the ice isn't strong enough to hold your ice axes, except and the ladders and things. So there was just us and maybe half a dozen other people there at that point, which was quite nice. They say that if you go in sort of January, February, March time, it's really crowded, so you don't get to appreciate it. So we got there. Everyone has their moment on the rock. I was first. Typically, I had to be first there, didn't I? But the best bit for myself was while everyone else was having their photographs and moment, I actually had a little walk around the area. And that's where I got probably some of my best photographs because you kind of see the mountains and the routes where the professionals go to summit Everest and realise how difficult it is. And you can see why people sadly lose their lives because it's just terrifying. As I was there's a rumble. Suddenly there's a huge avalanche, avalanche on one of the surrounding mountains. Nowhere near where we were, but enough to make you think it sounded like a low-flying jet. But then you looked, you could see the snow. So I thought, wow, I've witnessed an avalanche. And yeah, made it, done it. Get in there, held up the Union Jack, held up the Himalayan flag. We all had a moment as a team. We drank some Nepalese tea, which is obviously a tradition. You drink, celebrate, not by having a beer. Don't have a beer at this point because your body would you'd just drop asleep, I think, if you had one sip of alcohol. But then we had to turn around and walk back to Gorishet over the glacier that we'd come down. And it took about an hour and a half to get to base camp. It took us maybe nearly 3 hours to get back because the group were physically gone. Literally walking 2 steps, resting, 2 steps, resting. It was dangerous because it was slippy. My team members were falling over and rolling around, one guy turned his ankle and was in a bit of pain. Just generally very treacherous. So you couldn't breathe, but the views were breathless. And also it was quite tough mentally because you were having to concentrate and you were tired. So you got back and we were then told halfway on the route that there's 2 options for Kalapatar. Now, Kalapatar is a mountain on the opposite side of Gorishet that gives you a view of Everest. So when you're within base camp, Everest is above you. You can't really see it. There's a mountain called Nuptse that's in the way. And the base camp treks kind of go around the side of Nuptse onto a ledge and then onto Everest. So that's why base camp's where it is. He said most people see the sun rise on Kalapatar, but it means getting up at 4 a.m., which means you have to get up at 4 a.m., you have to do the walk and then walk all the way back to the next village the next day. So it becomes a very long day. Or if you feel up to it, the sunset is more rewarding. But it means another 2 or 3 hours of walking when we're already absolutely drained. What do you want to do? I said, can we maybe eat first and see how we feel? Because the plan was to get back to the tea house and have lunch and then decide. A couple of the guys in the group, the marathon runners, were like, no, I want to see both. They were like determined to see both. And they were saying, well, we can't really do both, but if you feel fit enough, let's see the sunset. The story is that the sky goes like an orange, and then Everest turns orange on its own because it's the highest point, and the rest of the mountain stays in the shadows. And it's like the Northern Lights. It's a pretty special, unique experience. However, Kalapatar looked a big mountain. It's about 500 meters, so nowhere near as big as some of the higher fells in the lakes. But when you've had days in your legs and no oxygen, it was quite daunting looking at it. But we thought, let's see how we do. Even if we get halfway up and get a photo, it's once in a lifetime. We'll probably never come here again. Let's do it. So anyway, we set off to Kalapatar. A couple of the group members within 100 yards said, I'm done. I'm happy. I can see the bit of Everest. I've got a long lens camera. I'll get my shot. A couple of others decided to go to this next level. Me being myself, got to the next level and said, can I go to that rock there? And they kind of said, well, you can if you want, but be careful coming downwards. It'll be dark and there's a lot of loose rock, but it's your body, it's your opportunity, but be careful. So I was done at this point, but me being me, I always like an extra challenge. I wanted to get to Kalapatar. So I pushed myself on, and it was probably only 200 yards, maybe 2 football pitches, but it felt like 200. My legs ached. I had to stop every few steps. My thighs were burning like I was doing squats. It was horrible. But as I was looking to the right, you could see the mountain sort of changing colour. You could see the pyramid of Everest getting bigger and bigger every step. And I've got to get it. I've got to get a picture. I've got to get it. I've got to get it. And I did 10 steps. Let's do another 5. Come on, I can do another 5. And I got to this ridge and then a little bit more. Stopped, turned around just as Nuptse was turning red. And then the red kind of lifted. And then suddenly the top of Everest just went red. And you could hear a pin drop. And there was other people sort of milling around. There was just this 10 minutes of silence. Then the moon come across. And it was just like, that meant more to me than the base camp. The base camp was it's just like a white field with a few rocks with a mountain next to it. It was special getting there, but I didn't feel like it was an achievement, but I felt getting to that point on Kalapatar at the physical stage we all were was magical. And then this picture, and I probably took 100 pictures to get the one picture that I wanted. And it was amazing.
I've seen that on Facebook, I think, Matt, the orange and the...
Yeah, incredible. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And that was it then. It made the trip. We then had to navigate in the dark. So I have got a really powerful, like 2,000 lumen torch, and sort of guiding myself down. It was horrible. It was like parallel skiing. Anyone who's parallel skied, as you turn, the ground sort of slips away. So you've got to kind of twist your hips and everything aches. You're kind of absolutely done at this point. And yes, people say you don't have to be fit to do this trek. You've got to have a certain level of fitness, but it's more resilience. It's being able to go through that pain barrier. And that's what the professional athletes do, don't they? They push their bodies to the extreme. I felt like I was pushing my body at that point to its extreme. My hips felt like they were being pulled away. We got back down to Gorishek. Everyone's bounced in, back to the tea room, which was very basic. It was on par with Paradise Lodge in Djibouti, but we accepted that because how do you get stuff up there? We stayed the night and we set off first thing in the morning, literally at 6 a.m. to get down to a safer altitude. One of the group members unfortunately fell ill in the night and had to be helicoptered down. Really, really shame. I'm chuffed to bits that he managed to he got to base camp, but not to Kalapatar. But I was chuffed that he at least got to base camp and got to the place. But unfortunately, he had to be helicoptered down, which sickened us a little bit because we were such a good group and he was a character, a real funny guy. We set off back down, spent the night in a place called Pangboche, so you almost retrace your steps. So you see everything again, but facing it from a different direction. And then we get back down the second day to Namche Bazaar, where we met up with the guy that was feeling 10 times better at the lower altitude. He'd been to a medical centre, got some really good medication on his insurance, which made it worthwhile because it's not cheap to have insurance to travel in the Himalayas.
No.
Sort of reacclimatized a little bit. And then the last day, we walked 16 miles back to Lukla from Namche. So where it took us 3 days to get to Namche, we did it in 1 day back to Lukla. All the way back to Lukla, and then told the airport shut, and it could be shut for 3 days. I was flying back to England. So straight away, you're kind of thinking, no, can't be shut. Then told us then that they might open it for half an hour, but we're at the bottom of the list of 6 flights that we're flying. We have to get the other 5 groups of people there first. So really cheesed off at this point. You'd had enough. You're ready to go back to your luxury hotel.
Yeah.
We actually discussed as a group about chartering our own helicopter. Now, fortunately, there was a guy from the Cayman Islands in my group that was a very wealthy businessman, and he was willing to pay, and then we reimburse him when we get back into Katmandu. And I said to myself, I've never flown in a helicopter before. Imagine what it must be like flying over the Himalayas on a helicopter. I don't care what it costs. If it gets me back safely, it means that I paid for this nice hotel and I get to recharge my batteries before coming back to England. It's money well spent. It's a priceless experience. And then suddenly there was an announcement. Again, there was some backhanders going on, I think, between our guides and this guy who has this tea house that runs we suddenly went from number 6 in the itinerary to number 2. Our Sherpas literally carried our bags into the airport. So we literally our main bags, they even put them on the conveyor belt for us. We then tip them. They don't come down with us. We then tip them. So I gave them a few quid, which would keep them comfortable for a long time if they get £2 a day. But without them, I wouldn't have been able to do it. They were literally then thrown on the airplane, and within minutes we were taking off. Apparently, after our flight took off, they closed the airport again. So we were really lucky. Saved us a few £100 in helicopter fees and being stranded in Lukla, because by then we'd seen enough.
Yeah.
Land back in Katmandu, and we had 2 days rest in Katmandu, where literally we just sat and ate properly, had a few beers, couple of souvenir shopping, and then I flew back to Manchester fortnight ago. So amazing experience.
Absolutely incredible, that, Matt. When I called you a legend at the beginning, I think I was underestimating you, mate.
Yeah, I think if anyone wants to do it, I suggest save up and you can do it. Get yourself fit, use the Lake District as your playground and do it. Obviously, everybody's different. Some people's bodies, there's known athletes, professional athletes that have failed to get up there because of the altitude. And it's no fault of their own, it's just the way your body is. But if you can do it, fantastic. The bonus was I managed to raise over £1,200 for Dementia UK.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Very close to our family's heart. So that was the even bigger bonus. That kind of the family were rooting for me. When I was having those dark moments, we're proud of you, Matt. You've raised all this money. Knowing that the people's contributions, and I thank them all wholeheartedly for the donations, is going to help somebody or help families during a difficult time. My difficult time of being cold and tired is nothing compared to what other people are experiencing in the world. So made it all worthwhile.
Has it made you think a little bit differently about things, Matt?
Yes, it has in some ways, because just seeing the way of life of a different culture makes you realise that we are very privileged where we live and we take things for granted. And we also are a little bit entitled as well. We expect everything, don't we? We expect Wi-Fi, we expect electricity, we expect the shelves to be stacked, we expect the Amazon delivery to come. We expect all our students to study without any issues while I'm teaching. We expect our kids to behave themselves all the time. And you realise that all those things are important, but life is life. And I've changed my outlook a little bit, not to take things too seriously, trying to not take things for granted, enjoy myself, work hard, play hard, enjoy myself, not get worked up and stressed about things like I used to. So the traffic on Abbey Road annoys me daily. Oh, come on, Matt. It's not the end of the world, There's a whole world out there. And I said I'd never go back to the Himalayas. And I remember saying when I was at Katmandu airport, well, that's it. I've seen Nepal.
Yep.
That'll do. And now, 2 weeks along down the line, after telling my stories to people like yourself and getting photographs, I created a little photo album and things. I want to go back. So I probably will go back. When, I don't know. But there's other trails you can do.
Would you go with your family, though, rather than just go on your own? Or
yeah, I think I'd like to take Fiona. I think
share it.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe experience that a lot. I think we'd probably kill each other they always say it's not a good thing to do as a couple. One of the young lady that came from Dublin, she had the option to come with one of her partners, but she said she travelled before with a previous partner and it didn't go down too well. So she was quite happy to have that time on her own. I enjoyed the time on my own. It was good for my mental health. It was good for my outlook on life. But I miss my family like mad. I miss my daughters and certainly miss Fiona.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to experience something similar, if not doing the same track. There's the Annapurna routes, there's various other different ones, but I also want to climb as well. I'd like to actually get on a summit of one of them mountains. So that's kind of what I'm looking for in the new year, is to improve my climbing skills. And never say never. I don't say Everest maybe is a little bit too far, but I'd like to maybe get onto some of these mountains by my own hands. So yeah, definitely got some new passions.
Have you been up the lake since you got back?
Not yet. I was going to go last weekend, but I just said the weather's been horrific, hasn't it? The first weekend I was done with the mountains. I think I even said it on a Facebook post. I'm done with the mountains. But this weekend I'm hoping to get up there and have a walk. I don't think the weather's that kind at the moment, so I probably won't be on any of the higher fells. But I like the lakes at Christmas. There's just something, the way the trees look, the way a little bit of snow on the tops. I do like going up to places like Keswick and Ambleside at this time of year.
Yeah.
So definitely this weekend I'm going to try and get up there, whether I do a small walk, maybe get the mountain bike out over Christmas and get onto one of the ridges as well. So yeah, ready to go again. My body's about ready. I needed a week of doing nothing. I actually felt quite dozy and lethargic for a few days, and apparently that's quite normal after being in the altitudes, high altitudes. I feel like I'm live and kicking again now.
Yeah, I feel lethargic and dozy every day.
Must be those altitudes, Tony.
So, final thoughts, Matt, all our listeners out there, anybody who's contemplating doing something as magnificent as that, what would you say to them?
Obviously, we all have our limits, and you don't need to go to the Himalayas to enjoy the mountains, but if that's something you want to do, either get in touch with myself, I can point you in the right direction, or do your due diligence. There's lots and lots of good YouTube videos, there's lots and lots of really good guides and video blogs, etc., that talk about it. Get yourself fit. So maybe your New Year goal is to get out and do a walk around Barrow, some nice places in Barrow. Get yourself down the Abbey Path, the old line through Roosecote to Rampside, down Bonaire. There's some lovely places. Get outdoors, enjoy it, build your fitness up, maybe start using the Hoard in Ulverston. Funny enough, I used to run up and down the Hoard regularly just to get that bit of fitness, quick 15, 20 minutes, and then enjoy the Lake District. And if you get the opportunity to do it. But if not, there's some fantastic places in the lakes. Go and do the Wainwrights. And again, if you want some company on the lakes, give me a shout. I'm always willing to meet new people, and that's something I'm going to do in the new year, is start guiding people through the lakes with myself, because I think you can solve a lot of world's problems when you're not staring at your phone screen, reading social media and watching the news and getting brainwashed by the cycle of life that the TV and social media provides. Get outside, get yourself feeling fitter, get some fresh air and talk.
Wow.
And share. And that's something I'm more passionate about now than any of my team sports. The team sports were great growing up, but doing the outdoors has changed my whole approach to life. And I think a lot of people that do that, and if they can experience what I would call it an epiphany, but that moment, light bulb moment that it changed me, it can help other people as well, then great.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks very much, Matt. Absolutely fascinated. Love listening to your adventures there in the Himalayas. And I'd just like to say thanks very much for coming on Kamdu FM and sharing your experiences.
No, thank you, Tony. Hopefully speak to you soon.
Cheers, Matt. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.